I want to start with the phone, because that's where this whole thing unravels. Not a text. Not a receipt. Not a lipstick on a collar. Nothing that cinematic. Just a phone I wasn't supposed to find, sitting in the pocket of a jacket my husband left on the bathroom floor on a Wednesday night like it was nothing. Like it was just a jacket. Like there wasn't a second life inside it. My name is Jade. I'm 31. Married for 4 years to a man named Caleb who I met at a work event, dated for 18 months and married because he made me feel, for the first time in my adult life, completely safe. That's the word I always used about him. Safe. I used to say it to my friends and mean it like a compliment. Turns out I was describing the problem the whole time. The jacket was a gray one he wore to what he called a work dinner. He'd changed out of it when he got home, dropped it on the bathroom floor, which he never did. Caleb was meticulous about his clothes, always hung everything up, which I noted and then immediately forgot about because it was late and I was tired. I picked it up the next morning to hang it in the closet. And when I went to check the pockets before I hung it, because I do that, I check pockets, I always have my hand closed around a phone that was not his phone. It was a cheap smartphone. Black. No case. Screen off. I stood in the bathroom holding it and just stared at it for a second like it might explain itself. Then I pressed the side button and the screen lit up. No lock code. Just open. Like whoever owned it wasn't worried about anyone finding it. The wallpaper was a photo of Caleb. Not a photo I'd taken. Not one I'd ever seen. It was him laughing at something outside somewhere, squinting a little in the sun. He looked happy. He looked the way he used to look at me in the first year we were together. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub. I opened the contacts. There were 11 saved numbers. Most of them were just names I didn't recognize: Lisa, Danny, the gym, a plumber. And then at the very bottom of the list, under J, was a contact that made the floor tilt under me. It said, "Work, Dave." The number was mine. I have gone over that moment so many times, trying to figure out what I felt first. I think the first thing was confusion, like my brain was loading and just spinning. Then it hit me. He had my number saved under a fake name on a secret phone so that whoever saw his messages would think he was texting a coworker named Dave. He had been carrying a whole separate device just so that conversations with me, his wife, could be disguised. Which meant someone else was looking at his real phone. Which meant someone else thought they knew exactly who Caleb was texting and calling. Which meant I put the phone down on the sink and walked into the kitchen and stood there for a long time breathing. Caleb was already at work. I had 40 minutes before I needed to leave. I went back to the bathroom. I picked up the phone again. I opened the messages to my number to "Work, Dave," and I read them. Not all of them. Just the last few weeks. The good morning texts he sent me every day that I thought came from his regular phone. The voice notes, and there were voice notes, that I thought were just him being sweet. He'd been sending them from this phone. His real phone showed something completely different to someone else. I put the phone in my own bag. I went to work. I sat at my desk and I did not cry. I want to be clear about that, not because I'm proud of it, but because I've seen stories like this where the woman immediately falls apart, and I think that gives people the wrong idea, like holding it together means you didn't really feel it. I felt it. I felt it in my hands and in my chest, and in that specific place behind your sternum that hurts when your body is trying to keep something enormous from getting out. I just kept it in long enough to think. The first thing I needed to know was, who was the real phone for? He had my number saved under a fake man's name on a secret phone. His wife. He was hiding his wife. I didn't go through the secret phone any further that day. Not because I was being restrained, because I was scared of what I'd find and I needed a minute to be ready for it. I've heard people say they wanted the truth, and I understand that. I wanted it too. I just also knew that once you see it, you can't unsee it, and I wanted to be sitting down somewhere safe when it happened, not in a lift on the way home. I called my friend Serena on my lunch break. Serena is the most level-headed person I have ever met in my life. She has this quality where she does not panic, she just processes, like a very calm computer. I told her everything in about 4 minutes. There was a pause on the other end, and then she said, Serena said, "Jade, don't put it back. Don't tell him you have it. And don't go home tonight until we've figured out what you're actually dealing with." I went to Serena's after work. We sat at her kitchen table. She made tea neither of us drank. And I opened the phone. The text to and from his real number, the one I knew, the one that was in my phone, were still there on the secret phone. Our whole relationship, essentially, condensed into a message thread. But there was another thread. A long one. Longer than ours. Longer than anything I was prepared for. The contact was saved as home. The most recent message in that thread, sent at 11:47 the previous night while I was asleep next to him, said, "Can't wait to see you this weekend. I've missed you so much. Tell the kids I said goodnight. Tell the kids." I put the phone face down on Serena's kitchen table. I heard her say my name. I heard myself say, "He has children." It came out completely flat, like a fact I was reading off a page. He has children with someone else. Serena didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, very quietly, "Jade, I think he might have another family." Part 2, the other family. The woman's name was Renee. I know that because her name was in the home thread, he'd used it a handful of times. Renee. A regular name. A name that could belong to anyone. I said it out loud in Serena's kitchen, and it tasted like nothing and everything at the same time. Caleb and I had been married for 4 years. The messages in the home thread went back 6. Which meant Renee was first. Which meant I was the second family. Which meant the whole story I thought I was living, the one where Caleb and I built something from the ground up together, was actually the side story. I was the affair. I was what he was hiding from her. And she and her kids were what he was hiding from me. He had built 2 complete lives and was running them simultaneously and had managed it, apparently, for at least 4 years of our marriage without either of us knowing the other existed. I want to tell you how I felt, but I'm not sure I have the right words. Betrayed doesn't cover it. Humiliated doesn't cover it. What I felt was more like erasure. Like finding out that you are not the main character of a story you thought was yours. Like the floor of your life being made of paper. Serena was the one who stayed practical while I was falling through the paper floor. She pulled out her laptop and within 20 minutes had found Renee on Facebook. Public profile. 3 kids, 9 and 7 and 5. A house in a suburb 40 minutes from ours. Photos of holidays and school plays and birthday cakes. Photos where you can see in the background a gray jacket I recognized hanging on a hook by the front door. And then Serena found the profile photo Renee had posted 18 months ago. She and Caleb at what looked like a backyard barbecue. Her leaning back against him, his arms around her, both of them smiling. It was tagged, 10 years together. The twist, the thing I did not see coming. 10 years together. Which meant Caleb and Renee had been together for 2 years before he ever met me. And it meant that every single thing he had ever told me about his life before us, that he'd been single for years, that he'd never lived with anyone, that he wasn't a relationship person until me, was fabricated. He hadn't changed for me. He had simply added me to an existing structure. I was not someone he chose instead. I was someone he chose additionally. I did not sleep that night. I lay in our bed next to Caleb. He'd come home around 9, kissed my forehead, said I seemed tired, went to sleep with terrifying ease, and I stared at the ceiling and I ran through every moment of our relationship looking for the seams. They were everywhere once I knew where to look. The business trips that happened with a convenient regularity. The way he never let me visit his office unannounced. The one time I'd mentioned wanting to meet his family and he'd said they weren't close and then changed the subject so smoothly I'd let it go. How he never posted us on social media, which I'd thought was private but was actually protective of his other life. I thought about the last 4 years of my life. I thought about the miscarriage we'd had 14 months ago, the one that nearly broke me, the one where I'd reached for him in the hospital and he'd held my hand and cried, actually cried, and I had thought, this is who he is, this is the man I married. A man who will show up when it's hardest. I thought about that night so often afterward as one of the moments that proved what we had was real. I will never be able to think about that night the same way again. That's one of the things they don't tell you about this kind of betrayal. It doesn't just hurt you in the present. It goes back and contaminates specific memories you needed to keep. It takes things that were real to you and makes you question whether they were real at all. That's not dramatic. That's just what happens, and it is brutal. I made a decision before the sun came up. I was not going to confront Caleb. Not yet. Not before I talked to Renee. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds crazy, reaching out to the other woman, except she wasn't the other woman. She was the first woman. She was the one who'd been there for 10 years and had 3 kids with him and thought she knew who she was married to. She deserved to know. And honestly, selfishly, honestly, I needed to know what she knew. Because if there was any chance she already knew about me, if there was any chance this was some kind of arrangement he'd sold to both of us in different ways, I needed to understand that before I did anything else. I sent her a message from a fake Instagram account. Nothing dramatic, just a blank account I made in 5 minutes, that said. I wrote, "Hi Renee. My name is Jade. I need to talk to you about Caleb. I know how this sounds. I'm not trying to cause drama. I just found out something and I think you deserve to know it too. I can prove everything I'm about to tell you. Please don't show him this message. She read it within the hour. She didn't respond until 3 hours after that. When she did, it was 2 words. Renee said, "Call me." I stepped outside my office building, sat on a bench, and called the number she sent. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice was steady, the kind of steady that takes work to hold, and she said, "Are you his girlfriend?" I said, "I'm his wife." She was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "How long?" I said, "We've been married 4 years. Together for 5.5. She made a sound I am not going to try to describe. Then she said, "I'm his wife too. We've been married for 6 years. That's when I started crying. Not sobbing. Just tears coming out of my eyes while I sat on a bench outside my office building on a Tuesday, with my hands in my lap, while a woman I'd never met said the same words I'd just said to her from a different direction. We talked for 45 minutes. We compared dates. We compared details. We compared the lies, and the lies were so specific, so individually tailored to each of us, that it was almost impressive in the most disgusting way possible. He had told me he was an only child. He had told her he had one brother. He had told me he grew up in Phoenix. He had told her he grew up in Denver. He had a whole parallel biography. Not just a parallel life, a parallel identity, customized for 2 different women who would never, he had calculated, ever meet. By the end of the call, Renee and I had agreed on one thing. He was not going to know that we knew. Not yet. Not until we were ready. And we were going to get ready together. She said, "I'm his wife too." We were both his wife. He had built 2 women a whole life and never let either of us see the walls. What happened over the next 3 weeks was something I never expected, a friendship. Provisional, strange, forged in the worst possible circumstances, but real. Renee was methodical in a way I wasn't. She had a cousin who was a family lawyer, and she got us both on a call with him within days. She was the one who pointed out that Caleb's bigamy, because that's what it was, legally, bigamy, changed the nature of what we were each entitled to. She was the one who started gathering financial documents. She had caught discrepancies in their accounts for years, and had chalked them up to business expenses. Now, with the full picture, she understood exactly what she'd been looking at. I want to say something about Renee here because it matters. I thought when I called her that I was going to feel some version of competition or resentment, or the complicated ugly thing that women in these situations are sometimes expected to feel toward each other. I didn't feel any of that. What I felt was recognition. Here was a woman who had also believed completely. Who had also built her sense of reality on a foundation that turned out to be one man's performance. We were on the same side of something. That was clarifying in a way nothing else about this situation was. 3 weeks after I found the phone, on a Friday evening, Caleb came home to find me sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open. He dropped his bag, said hey, went to the fridge, opened a beer. Normal. Completely normal. I watched him do it. Then I said, "Caleb, I need to show you something." He turned around. I turned the laptop to face him. On the screen was a photo from Renee's Facebook, the backyard barbecue photo, him and Renee, the one tagged 10 years together. Next to the laptop, face up on the table, was the secret phone. He didn't move. He stood by the fridge with the beer in his hand and looked at the screen and then at the phone and then at me. And I genuinely watched the calculation happen behind his eyes. The split second where he was deciding which version of this he could still spin his way out of. He chose, "It's not what you think." I said, "Caleb, I've talked to Renee." The beer bottle slipped in his hand. He caught it. He set it on the counter very carefully, like if he broke something it would make everything worse. Then he pulled out a chair and sat down. He put his face in his hands. He said, "How?" I said, "That doesn't matter." He said, "Jade, please. Please just let me." I said, "Don't. I've already talked to a lawyer. Renee's already talked to a lawyer. You don't need to explain anything to me tonight. You just need to know that we both know." He looked up at me from behind his hands and his face was doing something I'd never seen it do. Collapsing is the only word. Like every piece of it was trying to fall in a different direction. He said, "I love you. I need you to know that I actually don't," I said again. Quieter this time. "Please don't do that to me right now." And he stopped. He just stopped. Sat there. And for the first time in our entire relationship I saw him without the performance. Without the ease and the warmth and the specific way he had of making you feel like the most important person in any room. There was just a man sitting at a kitchen table who had run out of story. I stood up. I took my bag and my keys. I said, "My lawyer will contact you Monday morning. Don't call me." I went to Serena's. I sat on her couch. And then, finally, I cried. Not the controlled kind. The real kind. The kind where you don't fight it and it moves through you like weather and afterward you feel like something is gone but also, somehow, slightly lighter for it. Part 3: What came after. The legal situation was complicated in ways I am not going to pretend I fully understood at first. Bigamy is a crime. Caleb had legally married me while still legally married to Renee, which meant our marriage was void. Not ended, never valid. I had never actually been married. I had been someone's secret second household for 4 years without knowing it. The state did not recognize me as his wife. I had no spousal rights. I had nothing I thought I had. That should have been the thing that destroyed me. In some ways, I want to be honest, it came close. There's a difference between a marriage ending and finding out a marriage never existed. The grief is different. It's not just losing a person, it's losing a version of your own history. Losing the right to call yourself something. I had been someone's wife in my own life, and nobody else's in the eyes of the law, and the knowledge of that sits in a strange cold place I still visit sometimes when I'm not careful. But here's what actually happened legally, because Renee's cousin was very good at his job. Even though my marriage wasn't legally recognized, I had a civil case for fraud. Caleb had entered a marriage with me under false pretenses, accepted financial contributions from me to a shared life. I had contributed to a joint account, helped pay a mortgage on the house we rented together. Made financial decisions based on the assumption I was someone's legal partner and done so through deliberate deception. That's not a divorce case. That's a fraud case. And it hit differently in court than a standard divorce. Renee, meanwhile, had the full weight of an actual divorce plus a criminal bigamy complaint she chose to file. I want to be clear that she made that decision entirely on her own, and I supported it entirely. She had 3 children. She had a decade of her life. She had a right to every legal consequence she wanted to pursue. Caleb's lawyer tried, at one point, to position me as someone who had knowingly participated in an irregular marriage. That was his angle, that maybe I'd known, that maybe this had been some kind of arrangement. That lasted exactly as long as it took my lawyer to produce my call records, my messages, and a written account from Renee confirming that I had reached out to her in shock and that we had cooperated openly from the moment I found out. The angle disappeared. Caleb's lawyer moved on. There's a moment I want to tell you about because it's the one I think about most. About 6 weeks after everything came out, Renee and I met in person for the first time. We'd been talking on the phone almost daily by that point, sharing documents, updating each other on legal developments, occasionally just talking because there was nobody else in either of our lives who understood what this specific thing felt like. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our neighborhoods. I got there first. I was sitting at a table when she walked in, and I recognized her immediately from the photos. She stopped when she saw me. And I think we both had the same strange flash of, I don't know what to call it. Recognition that should not have existed. We were strangers who had been shaped by the same person, who had been told different versions of the same lies, who had loved, in good faith, the same man at the same time without either of us ever consenting to that. We had that in common in a way that was so strange and so specific that it bypassed the normal distance between 2 people who have just met. She sat down across from me. We looked at each other for a second. Then she said, "You're prettier than your pictures." And I laughed. A real laugh, sudden and involuntary, the first genuine laugh I'd had in 6 weeks. She laughed too. And then we ordered coffee and sat there for 3 hours and talked about everything except Caleb, which was, I think, exactly what both of us needed. She said, "You're prettier than your pictures." And I laughed for the first time in 6 weeks. 2 women who had married the same man, meeting for the first time, and somehow finding something real in the wreckage. I'm not going to romanticize what Renee and I have. It's not a movie. We don't talk every day anymore. We're not best friends. We are 2 people who went through something together that neither of us would wish on anyone, and we carry a quiet understanding of each other that I think will last a long time even if the contact eventually fades. We check in. We made sure the other one was okay during the hard parts of the legal process. When the civil judgment came through in my favor, she texted me a single emoji, a fist, and I cried at my kitchen table for 10 minutes. Caleb pled to a reduced charge on the bigamy complaint in exchange for a full financial settlement with Renee. The civil fraud case resulted in a judgment that recovered most of what I had contributed to the joint accounts and the house, plus damages. He did not go to prison, which I have complicated feelings about and which I've made a kind of peace with because Renee decided she didn't want her kids to go through that process. Her choice. I respected it. I still do. He has not contacted me since the night I walked out of our kitchen. I don't know exactly where he is. I know he moved out of both houses. I know he lost his job, his employer found out about the bigamy, and he was let go. I know this from Renee, not from anything I sought out. I stopped wanting to know things about Caleb's life at some point during the civil case, almost without noticing it. One day he was taking up a lot of space in my mind, and the next he was smaller, and then smaller still, and now he is roughly the size of something I survived rather than something I'm still in. What I'm left with is harder to explain than the legal outcomes. I'm left with the knowledge that I love something that wasn't real. Not the feeling was real, I have to believe that, I refuse to let him take that too. But the context I loved it in was entirely constructed. Every morning I woke up next to him and felt lucky. He had made a choice to maintain a lie that required active, daily effort. That's not a man who lost control of a situation. That's a man who got up every day and chose it. I've been in therapy since March. My therapist has a way of asking questions that feel simple until you try to answer them. She asked me once, "What would you want the women who watch your story to know?" Not what you learned. Not advice. Just, what do you want them to know? I thought about it for a while. Then I said, I want them to know it can be this extreme. It can be this complete. You can love someone, know them, sleep next to them for years, and be living in a version of reality they entirely fabricated. And if that happens to you, it is not your fault for trusting. It is not stupidity. It is not naivety. It is what happens when you are a person who loves in good faith and you encounter someone with no faith at all. I also want them to know that you can find out something this shattering and still be okay. Not immediately. Not cleanly. But eventually, in the stubborn, imperfect way that people are okay, where you stop expecting the grief to go away and start carrying it more lightly. Where you find that the things you thought defined you, the marriage, the title, the shared life, were not actually the core of you. You are still there. You were there before him, and you are there after him, and he does not get to take that. I am still in the apartment we shared. I repainted the bedroom a dark green, nothing that would remind me of anything. I have a plant on the windowsill that I somehow have not killed in 7 months, which feels like an achievement. I see Serena every week. I call my mother on Thursdays. I am not dating anyone, and I don't think I want to for a while, and I've stopped feeling like I need to apologize for that. The secret phone is in a box in my closet. I don't know why I kept it. I think because it was the thing that told me the truth when nothing else did. I open the box sometimes and look at it, and then I close the box again. At some point I'll throw it out. Not yet. When it feels like something that happened to a different version of me than the one I'm currently living with. The last thing I'll say is this. There's a contact in that phone saved as Work Dave with my number. My husband, or the man I thought was my husband, looked at me, looked at our life, looked at everything I trusted him with, and saved me under a fake name on a fake phone so that his real life could stay hidden. He hid his wife. He thought she was the kind of person you could hide. He was wrong about that. I hope wherever he is, he knows it.